Hey there, I'm Carrie Wolf-Park, your parent coach. I'm a mother of 6 and I fostered 10 children. This podcast is a space for caregivers of kids with trauma to come out of isolation and get the support they deserve, moving from surviving to thriving. We will discuss how to shift your mindset, better manage trauma triggers, and other eye-opening issues. Through my work and lived experience, I know it is possible to manifest harmony amongst what seems like chaos, and I'm committed to showing you how to do the same. I look forward to connecting with you. In episode 1, we discussed why it's important to have a safety plan if your child is violent. I gave you some areas to consider that would be included in the plan, and I trust you molded it to specifically meet the needs of your family. I just wanted to give you a structure and get you thinking about things that maybe you wouldn't have already. Check out my earlier podcast if you missed it. Today, I'm going to talk about trauma as well as how we all talk about our kids who have been through trauma and how we talk to our kids about their trauma. These are big topics, so we are going to actually continue into the next episode in using what we learned today in different contexts. First, though, let's get aligned on the importance of our words. Our words create our experience. And when I say our words, I'm including our thoughts, not just the words that we speak audibly. The words in our heads, the thoughts we tell ourselves, are super powerful. We hear our words and thoughts as the truth about a person or situation. And in that way, they create our beliefs. I just said that our words create our experience. Another way to say that is our words, thoughts, and beliefs create our future. So how does this work? If you think or say or believe, you get the idea here. I'm going to be using these words interchangeably, okay? Let's say, my child is a burden. Then you will experience your child to be a burden. You think, my child is a burden, is a truth, which triggers an emotion. In this case, perhaps the emotion is discouragement. Now your mindset or mental state is discouraged and discouragement. And your next thought, word, or action is born out of discouragement. You are creating your experience, your future, moment by moment in this way. I refer to this phenomenon as be, do, have. Your way of being is your mindset, your mental state. The doing of be, do, have is your thoughts, words, and actions coming from your state of, in this case, discouragement. And your having of be, do, have is the result, your experience, or your future. A simple example goes like this. When I'm being joyful, my thoughts and words will be light and happy, and my experience will be a positive one. On the contrary, if I'm being angry, my thoughts and words, my doing, might be mean and heavy, and my experience, my have, will be a negative one. Be, do, have. In this podcast, as we look at how we talk about this topic, I'm going to spend most of the time on the important work of getting yourself in a positive state. A positive or neutral way of being is the key here. Your mindset totally drives your conversations. That is to say, your way of being drives your doing. So the big emphasis today is on getting into a productive mindset. In our next episode, we will go through various trauma triggers and how you can address them, as well as talk about them with your child and others as necessary. All right, I'm going to press pause on this subject, and we will return to be, do, have later in this podcast. Let's move now to the word trauma. Trauma is a really big buzzword these days. Most people can identify some sort of trauma they've had in their lives at some point. The definition, however, is not the same as how most people use the word. Most people refer to an incident as being traumatic. For instance, a child is physically beat by her alcoholic mother on a frequent basis. People tend to say the child suffered trauma because she was beat by her alcoholic mother. No, that's not true. Trauma is actually the emotional response that one has to a terrible incident. So the trauma is the emotional response, not the thing that happened. Is being beat by your alcoholic mother a terrible incident? Of course. But not every child will have the same emotional response. So not every child who endures this terrible incident suffers from trauma. I loved participating in a webinar just last month with Scott Barry Kaufman, who's an awesome author and cognitive scientist. He's also a professor at Columbia University. He totally used my language and resonated with me when he said, trauma is our interpretation of the event. So again, the event itself is not the trauma. We interpret everything in our lives and immediately have an emotional response to our interpretation. And we interpret with our language, our words. What this means is it's important to be aware of our words and beliefs. For instance, a lot of people assume that if a child is adopted, given up by his own birth mother, he must have trauma. And I know plenty of adopted children who have no trauma. Let's now talk about our thoughts and beliefs about our children with trauma. As a parent, we have a lot of thoughts and beliefs about our children. By the end of this podcast, I want you to be clear on why it's vital that you handle your negative thoughts about your child. And I intend to give you the tools to do just that. I also have an intention of showing you how to create a better future for yourself and your family by changing your mindset. These two intentions are going to occur simultaneously because the way to handle your negative beliefs is to change your mindset, thereby creating a better future for yourself and your family. Maybe actually here's a good place for you to be taking some notes. So grab a pen and paper or pull up the Notes app or whatever you prefer on your phone. I want you to do a brain dump of the beliefs that you hold about your child who's been through trauma. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Just get it out. Don't worry about how you sound. Do your best to not judge so that you don't edit. This way you'll know all of what you need to handle. So also, when I say handle, I mean address specifically, not let them fester. Okay, so use columns or separate pages, somehow keeping distinct those beliefs and thoughts that support you and the child, and those that drag you down. In other words, the positive and the negative beliefs. You might have phrases like, so-and-so is hopeless and won't be able to hold down a job. Or, so-and-so will be dealing with this her whole life. Or, so-and-so is making my life miserable. Reflect on what you end up repeating to yourself when you think about this child, or when you confide to your friends about him. One I had for years that dragged me down, and I in turn dragged down my kids with me, was parenting is a thankless job. I felt so extremely underappreciated for all I was sacrificing and enduring behind closed doors. Once I let that go, I was so freed up and real transformation began to take place in my family. It's important to recognize your positive beliefs also. And I know you can find some, even if you are listening now in a ball of tears, only feeling hopeless. Ask yourself things like, how does this child excel? What are her gifts? What positive feedback do you get from teachers or anyone else outside the home? Use those. Okay, once you've got your lists, look at the negatives. Read through them. Do you really believe each one of them? You might hold firm to some as absolutely being the truth about that child. But others, you may be able to read now and go, oh yeah, that's not really the truth. It's more my reaction to her behavior. So grab all of those that you can break down. Okay, it's not the truth. Don't have to believe that. And we're going to let them go. So some people like to formally let go of beliefs like this, like write them on a paper and burn them, or write them and shred them, or do some other ritual. Other people just need to delete the lines from their phone and they're good to go. So you do you, and let go of these that you can clearly see, okay, that's not the truth about the kid. Then you're left with the ones that you believe to be true that are also negative and pull you and your family down. Now I'm going to loop back to my beginning be, do, have mini training. These beliefs are creating your experience. You believe your child is making you miserable, and therefore your way of being, your mindset, is misery. You're miserable. Your thoughts, words, and actions are rooted in misery. So I can almost guarantee your results are not fantastic, maybe somewhere close to miserable. Let's keep with this example of believing your child makes you miserable. If you can find just a bit of truth to the contrary, you can crack it open and dominate it rather than allowing it to dominate you. Is misery the only feeling you experience with regard to this child? Can you remember any moments of feeling joy or silliness or love or hope or anything else that's positive when you're with this child? If yes, then the belief is not a truth. You might try to argue that it's true some of the time. And I'd say back to you that if it's not true all the time, it's not a truth. And I'll take it a step further to remind you that no one can make you feel anything. You are fully responsible for your emotions. A lot of people like to blame others for how they're feeling because it lets them off the hook. And it's true that we are impacted by others and we have impact. But remember, if you take responsibility and own your emotions, you are then empowered to change them. If, on the other hand, your emotions are at the whim of others, you are disempowered and have no agency to be any other way. Now let's replace that wrong belief with an actual truth. You can make up what's real for you or what resonates, but for an example, one might sound like, only I have power over my emotions. So how then do you get into a different way of being, a new mindset or state or whatever word you prefer? The first step is to do what we just did. Acknowledge you are currently being, in this case, miserable. Being rigorous with your thoughts, continually reminding yourself that your child cannot make you feel a certain way. Choose a way of being you'd like to replace miserable with. Maybe calm or curious or productive. These are fairly neutral ways of being. The leap is typically too far to go from miserable to blissful, so we don't even try that. I love curious, of course. I'm a professional coach. My career is based on being curious about others. And when you're curious, you take the focus off of you. You also look at your child in a new light. You look for something you haven't seen before, and new possibilities open up. Okay, I'm getting off on a bit of a tangent here about curiosity because I love curiosity. But it is a great option for you to remember to choose a neutral way of being. So you're miserable and you want to be curious. First, lean into that positive truth you just established. In this example that we're working through, it was only I have power over my emotions. Now, move your body. Get your whole body as fully engaged as possible. Often, I have my clients stand up with me, even though we're on the phone or video, and we shake our bodies. Shake out that old lie that your child makes you miserable. Let it go at your fingertips or shoulders or wherever you're holding it in your body. Then, find a line on the floor. That will be your line of demarcation between your old belief dragging you down and your new belief empowering you. Fully embrace your new belief that, in this case, only you have power over your emotions. Say it as many times and as loud as you'd like until you own it. Feel it through your body. And when you're ready to claim it for your life, jump over that line and don't look back. With the belief that you own your emotions, you can choose curiosity as your way of being. Consider what it feels like to be curious about your child. Literally, what do you feel in your body? How do you see your child differently through a lens of curiosity than you did through that one of misery? Try on being curious like astronauts put on their spacesuits. Be fully enveloped by curiosity. It's who you are in this moment. Be aware of your current thoughts about your child or what you may ask her that maybe you never have. Raise your self-awareness and witness this new you. You just created a new and better future for yourself. Your now is that future. Hey, I'm taking a moment here to thank you for listening to our podcast, Parenting Kids with Trauma. Be listening for actions you can take this week as a way to move your life forward. Also, I invite you to book a free consultation with me on our website, carriewolfpark.com. That's KARIWOLFFPARK.com. Please also subscribe and write a review. And we would love to hear your story. I want you to be heard. It's empowering. And we want to amplify these stories anonymously to others so more and more families know they are not alone. You can share your story on our website either by voice or text. Now let's get back to it. I mentioned a big one for me was obliterating the belief that parenting is a thankless job. That's a phrase a lot of people throw around casually, but it's actually really dangerous. Believing that to be true feels terrible, especially for us with lots of kids whose ages span many years. I've got 14 years between my eldest and my youngest. I literally heard myself say that once out loud, and it caught my attention. I was aware that as I sat in that mud hole of a belief, I felt tired and burdened and hopeless. Yuck! I did not like any of that. It was super uncomfortable. In that moment, I could also hear so many people literally thanking me for fostering and adopting. I could also hear my adult daughter's voice thanking me many times for all kinds of things throughout her life. But bigger than all of the actual thank yous I knew I had received, I switched up my perspective on parenting. Because you see, I also had a belief, and I still do, that parenting is one of the most challenging yet important roles that anyone can take on in this lifetime. In that moment, I felt extreme humility that I was the one chosen by Child and Protective Services, as well as chosen by a higher divine power to parent all these beautiful children. Wow, what a privilege. I sat in awe for some time. Even saying it now, I feel the grandness of that belief. Since then, I've given gratitude daily for being able to be the parent to all of my children, regardless of the circumstances at hand on any given day. Letting go of the belief that parenting is a thankless job and replacing it with the belief that it is a privilege to parent, my way of being became kinder, gentler, more open-hearted. I mentally was embracing all my children and myself rather than resenting being in this situation at times. As I said earlier, also, this was the beginning of true transformation in our home. We promoted this podcast to be on how we talk about our kids with trauma and how we talk to our kids about their trauma. As you can see, the foundational work of altering your mindset to one that serves you and your family is so important. Once you do that, these conversations sound so much different. When your way of being is neutral or positive, you aren't inclined to cut down your child and swim in that mud hole, hoping that your friend will jump in with you and commiserate on how awful your life is and how terrible your kid is. I urge all parents also to be intentional with whom they share what about their children. Our children are their own people. They get to tell their own stories. When they are babies and very young kiddos, it's easy to forget that. They're so dependent on us, and they're not talking and they're not hanging out with their friends, that their stories simply feel like they are our stories and our experiences. And while we do have our experiences and stories, when they involve other people, they aren't ours alone to share. As your kids grow up, you may suddenly realize that you're sharing a very personal story about another person, which you would never do with a friend about another friend, for instance. This is actually the reason I am not very specific in this podcast about my own children's situations and incidences. Not all of them wanted to have their lives be open to the public, which I completely respect. I remember seeing not long ago an interview with a young woman who realized that her mother had shared everything about her life when she was young on Facebook. So now, as a young adult, her mom's friends knew all kinds of personal things about her that happened 15 years earlier. Yikes, don't do that to your children. I'm not saying to say nothing and isolate yourself. What I am saying is be intentional and don't gossip. The conversation needs to be productive in some way. There are a lot of conversations to be had with teachers and school administrators, for example. But there's no good reason to post trauma-related intimate details about your child on Instagram. And when you are having these conversations, be certain that your mindset is as positive as possible so that your words and actions are productive. When you speak directly to your child about trauma, it's super important to fill them up with what's positive and good about them. They get a lot of negative at school, from their peers, social media, and other places. Don't fabricate anything or place an exaggerated spotlight on the positive. Just remember to include both. It would be like going to a performance review at work and only hearing what you did wrong. The positive feedback not only feels good, but it lets you know what your supervisor appreciates about you and what you want to be sure to keep doing more of. So reminding your child what you love about him is also a great reminder for you to remember what you love about your child in the times when it gets hard. It's also important to separate the behavior and choices from the child and her character. It's very common for kids who have been through trauma to feel poorly about themselves. So while we still have to hold boundaries, factual, positive comments go a long way with many kids. Such as, "I'm really disappointed you did this. You are a good boy and I love you, and you made a bad choice." That is in contrast to, "You did what? I can't believe you did that. Don't you care about us at all?" One addresses the behavior, and the other is an emotional reaction to the situation, which targets the child. Of course, specifically what you say depends on their age and other factors. Those are just examples. After an incident, it's important to stick with the routine and keep moving. This is even true if the child had been violent. If it's clearly a trauma-triggered incident, once it's over, move on. Do not process it in that moment. If it's bedtime and your child now is finally back in bed, pick up where you left off in the routine and complete it. Most kids who have been through trauma need the routine. So taking it away is not a wise consequence and is likely to re-trigger the child. A side note here, as I've been in this situation many times. For several years, we had the good fortune of having a behaviorist in the home with us, and this was an amazing tool for me to learn from. I remember the first time one of my kiddos got triggered at bedtime, and it was a whole thing. Once we were through it, I was instructed to jump right back into the routine where we had left off. I was incredulous in my head. Are you kidding me? The kid does all that and then gets to be rewarded with my lullaby and foot massage? No way! But I'm actually quite good at following instructions, so I did as I was told. The child was asleep quickly. I also reflected on all the times something similar had happened when the behaviorist was not in the house. And I did not jump right back into that routine. And it was fuel that rekindled the trigger. And it was much worse for both of us. So while it may go against your intuition, I highly recommend it anyway. Okay, so the next day or after some time, when it's clear that the child and you are grounded again and you're in a positive mindset, you may choose to have a conversation about what happened. Again, this totally depends on many factors, including age. When you approach the conversation with curiosity, you may learn more about the child and be able to predict and ward off a future trigger. A curious conversation also shows empathy and messages to the child that you really care about her and want to understand her better. This builds more trust, too. In our next podcast, we will name some common trauma triggers and what you can do about them. In addition, I want to take what we learned today and apply it. So you'll have the opportunity to change your mindset about your child and be set up to have more productive conversations with them and with teachers and family and whomever else you are having conversations with. I'm guessing there was some new information in today's podcast. When I introduce Be Do Have to my coaching clients, it's always new and takes some time to absorb. So I invite you to re-listen and go through the steps with your various beliefs and circumstances. Just take one step at a time. Thanks for joining today, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. If this podcast resonated with you, I invite you to share it with a friend. Please also follow our podcast and subscribe on our website, carriewolfpark.com. That's KARIWOLFFPARK.com. Also on our site, you can tell us what you got from this episode and what else you want to hear about. And we really want to hear your story. Reach out on our website and share either in voice or text. We want you to feel heard because it's empowering. And we want to share anonymously with others what happens in other families so everyone knows that no one is alone in this. I look forward to connecting with you next time.